Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if a tiny change in an emoji can totally flip its meaning, especially when you are talking to someone from a different language background? Stick around because today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of emoticons and the subtle signals they send. We all use emojis and emoticons every day, right? They're like little pictures that add emotion and tone to our digital messages. But have you ever thought about why some emoticons look the way they do? And if those little differences actually change what we understand, this new study dives headfirst into that question. It's all about how different visual quirks in emoticons, like the presence of a nose or a sideways flip, affect their meaning. And they also wanted to see if people who grew up speaking English understand these little symbols the same way as those who learned English later. So the big question here is, what tiny changes in an emoticon make a big difference in what we think it means? And does it matter if you are a native English speaker or not? The researchers here wanted to figure out which visual parts of an emoticon are super important for its meaning and which ones are basically just decoration. They also wanted to know if everyone understands them the same way. Think about it like this: is a smiley face with a nose the same as one without? Does turning a sad face upside down make it happy, or does it just mean something else entirely? To get to the bottom of this, the researchers designed a really clever study. They gathered up a bunch of emoticons, including some common ones and some with slight tweaks, and showed them to people. They then asked participants a few things. First, they asked them which emoticons they'd actually use in different situations, like a happy message, a sarcastic one. Imagine getting a text saying, "Well, that was sensible," and having to pick the perfect emoticon to go with it. They wanted to see what people chose. They even had these different scenarios like, "The weather seems nice today" versus "That is bloody stupid," and gave people a set of emoticons to pick from for each. Then they asked people to rate how suitable each emoticon was for a particular message. So, for "The weather seems nice today," would a smiley face be perfect, or just okay, or totally wrong? They also included intentionally bad emoticons in these lists to make sure people were paying attention. But perhaps the most interesting part was when they tested for meaning equivalence. They'd show a main emoticon like a simple smiley face, and then give people a list of other emoticons, some very similar, some a bit different, and ask them to pick which ones they thought meant exactly the same thing. So for a emoticon, they might show you or D and ask if they all carry the same happy vibe. This part is crucial for understanding if those little visual changes actually change the core message. Now, for the juicy results, what did they find? Well, they discovered that some visual changes really do matter, and others not so much. Turns out, changing the mouth shape is a big deal. If you change the mouth on a smiley face from a curve to something else, like a D for a big grin, it totally changes the meaning. The same goes for sad faces, or one showing a tongue sticking out. But here is a surprise: adding a nose to an emoticon, like going from to, doesn't really change what people think it means. It's like the nose is an optional accessory that doesn't affect the main emotion. And what about orientation? They found that if you just flip an emoticon upside down, like turning A into A, most people still get the general idea. It seems like our brains can easily adjust for that rotation. However, mirroring is a bit different. The study suggests we tend to process rotated emoticons more easily than mirrored ones, similar to how we read text. Vertical emoticons like the Japanese cow emoji were seen as quite different, but that's also because they often change more than just their orientation. The researchers also noted that it is not just the shape itself, but the expression being conveyed. A simple change from a colon to a semicolon for the eyes can drastically change the meaning, like going from a standard smile to a wink. This shows it's the implied emotion behind the visual element that really counts. Now, let's talk about the native versus non-native speakers. Here's where it gets really interesting. For the most part, native English speakers and non-native English speakers were surprisingly similar in how they used and understood emoticons. They tended to pick similar emoticons for similar situations, and they agreed on which ones were suitable for which contexts. This is great news for digital communication, suggesting emoticons can act as a common language across cultures. However, there were some subtle but important differences. For example, the winking emoticon was seen as suitable for positive contexts by non-native speakers, but native speakers thought it was less suitable and even a bit unsuited. But then, when it came to sarcastic contexts, native speakers found the emoticon very suitable, while non-native speakers didn't see it that way at all. This suggests that understanding the subtle nuances of sarcasm and how certain emoticons signal it takes time to learn. It's like there are layers to sarcasm, and non-native speakers might be picking up the more basic meanings first. They also found that non-native speakers were more likely to use certain upright emoticons, compared to native speakers who seem to prefer the sideways ones. This hints that even though emoticons are visual, they can still be influenced by language and cultural background. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Firstly, it confirms that not all visual variations in emoticons are created equal. Mouth shape is a major meaning maker, while elements like the nose are pretty much irrelevant. Orientation matters too, with rotation being more easily understood than mirroring. This research could be super useful for technology, like translation apps, or even AI that tries to understand our online messages. If we can teach machines which visual elements are key, they can get better at understanding what we really mean. And for cross-cultural communication, this study offers a lot of hope. The fact that native and non-native speakers largely agree on emoticon meanings is fantastic. It means these little visual cues can really help bridge gaps. But it also highlights that mastering the subtle uses, especially in complex situations like sarcasm, takes time and exposure. Emoticons aren't universally understood in the same exact way. Their meanings are learned within a language community. So while they're a great tool, we still need to learn the specific dialect of emoticons used in a particular online space or language group. What I love about this study is how it breaks down something we do unconsciously every day into understandable pieces. It shows us that these digital faces are more complex than they seem, and that learning to use and interpret them correctly is a skill. Much like learning any part of a language, it makes me wonder about all the other little visual cues we use online and how we acquire that understanding. This research is a great step in understanding how we communicate digitally. Of course, it would be fascinating to see how these findings might differ if they looked at specific languages even more closely, or perhaps different types of online platforms. But for now, it gives us a really solid foundation for understanding the power of those little faces we type. Thanks for joining me on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this interesting, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more science deep dives. And let me know in the comments what emoticons you find most confusing or most powerful. See you next time.